Hello, welcome to my podcast. My name is Beloved J, Awaken the Divine Within. This is the second episode that I'll be posting, and I want to start this journey of my podcast with the subject of Maya. So this podcast is called Maya. Illusion is everywhere. And my intention in first sharing Maya is to help to bring awareness to the fact that we live in illusion. So Maya is illusion, if you haven't already figured that out by now. In Sanskrit, it's called Maya. In English terms, it's illusion. But we can also call it ignorance. It can be magical. It can be creation. These are all different interpretations of Maya. But Maya, in the way that it's spoken of in the yogic scriptures, it speaks of illusions and how there is a veil of illusion in our world that surrounds us. We live in Maya. Maya is everywhere. Ego creates Maya, illusion. Maya is like something that perceives itself to be there, but it's not really there. Like building castles in the sky. This is Maya, illusions. You can also consider it to be a false vision or a premature sense of certainty, right? The mind begins to wander, imagining things. For instance, when you start doing meditation and yoga and you start doing spiritual work, the ego all of a sudden gets all this wonderful information and immediately wants to, either open up a yoga studio or do lectures, or they think that they should start giving lectures or move to a big city to do something that's like grand, something that nobody's ever done before, right? This is the ego that starts to wander. When you get all of this information, it's like, oh, now I can do all these things with all this information, and it goes to that extreme level. That's Maya. Our mind beginning to create these illusions. Wandering of the mind will gain force by repetitive thinking. So the more that you think of it, right, it will start to grow power. Our thoughts are very powerful. The mystery of Maya is so huge that it hasn't been accredited. So we don't really know whether it exists or if it does not exist. Only wise people can see Maya. See through the illusions, see through the veils, right? So therefore, Maya in a sense is a misinterpretation of reality. Fear and greed keep us from seeing Maya, from seeing through Maya, through the illusion. And wisdom has a beginning as soon as we begin to tap into our inner knowledge. As soon as we start to receive the knowledge and actually integrate it, then wisdom has the doors open, right? Maya has two powers. Maya either hides reality or projects the illusions. So this is why it's super important to be aware of thyself, aware of yourself. Because only through knowledge and wisdom and that awareness of self can you begin to see beyond the veil of Maya. So liberty comes with knowledge, and without right mind or awareness, the mind continues to go back to ego, back to the illusion, because it believes it is reality. And you discard your true reality. This is the cycle of Maya, constantly bringing illusions and trying to take your mind away from your true reality. Because as long as you are stuck in the illusion of ego, the illusion that Maya creates, then it solidifies that identity even more. And then you lose that connection to spirit, which is your true identity. And I'll get into that a little bit deeper here when I start talking about the sutras. But so you are responsible for what you create. In Maya, like I said, the mind loves to wander and be in repetitive thought. So you have to really be aware of where your thoughts are going, because we are manifesting machines and we can create our own realities. So you have to be responsible for what you create. We have to be aware of our thoughts, because we could be creating things that we necessarily don't want to put in our path, or that are not really beneficial for us. So every difficulty is meant to spring you forward on this journey. Everything is going to move you forward. So all you have to do is get through it, reap the rewards, and then let it go. And I know it sounds a lot easier said than done. But because the mind creates the problem, we can uncreate it as well. So this is the power of the mind and the power of being aware of your inner self, your true self, so that the mind doesn't take control. And, the mind pretty much just works based off of fear. So the more that you continuously, repetitively live on that cycle, the more real it is, and the less connection, right? The more disconnected you are from your true self, which is your spirit, your soul. So in the Course of Miracles, this is a book that I'm reading. And for those of you who know about it, there's no introduction needed, but for those of you who don't, this was a book that was written by, I already forget her name, I'm sorry, but Dr. Schumann, and she channeled Jesus. She channeled for 7 years the words of Jesus and wrote it down in a book. And it was published very privately, so that way it didn't leave its original form. And so for those of you who are not familiar with it, it's just, it's a foundation for inner peace. It helps you understand truth at its finest level, right? Helps you by working with the mind, which is our biggest challenge in life because, like I said, it loves to live in illusion. So in the Course of Miracles, it says, and I'm quoting this from the book, never forget that the ego is not sane. It represents a delusional system and speaks for it. Listening to the ego's voice means that you believe it is possible to attack God, and that part of him has been torn away by you. And you know, in Course of Miracles, in that book, the whole history behind it is that ego is completely separate from God. Now, and I hate saying separate because we're not really separate, right? And that's where my mind is getting stuck right now, is we're not really separate. We are all one. But when we allow ego to take the lead, then that does create separation, because it creates a false narrative, a false perception. And so we live in this false perception, and as spiritual beings, our job here is to wake up from that false perception and to remember our true sovereignty and our true divinity and our true power. Because the ego loves to believe that it's separate so that it can have its own identity. And instead of working with spirit, right? Like the ego wants to dominate so that it can have its own identity. But then we're living out of spirit, right? So then life can get out of balance. So this book talks about how to correct the mind and begin to learn how to use right thinking, awareness, which is where I'm going to tie it in with the Yoga Sutras. And it'll all come together hopefully for you guys. But the mind is capable of creating reality or making illusions. This is another line from A Course in Miracles. Just like the sutras, just like the scriptures, yogic scriptures teach, that Maya is everywhere. There is illusion. And we are capable of either creating reality with God or making illusions with the mind. And the mind loves to wander. The mind loves to wander because it feels safe there. It doesn't like change. Even if it knows it's good for you, it doesn't like change. So I'm going to kind of get into the sutras here. And, for those of you who don't know anything about yoga, it doesn't really matter. This is just what I'm going to share with you. Yoga Sutras are part of the yogic scriptures, the first yogic scriptures that actually came out before Christ. And this was a man named Patanjali, and he created guidelines, if you will. Sutras are steps, guidelines towards living an enlightened life. And you'll come to see how very similar they are to the teachings of Christ. So in the first book, starting from the beginning, book 1, line 2 of the sutras, and this is there's so many books out there, so please, feel guided to go to whichever sutra book you want to. Like the original one is a little bit harder to read for the normal, just the everyday mind, right? So this is a book that has broken it down. I'll put the description below of these books, The Course in Miracles. And this one is the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali by Edwin F. Bryant. Because, they kind of go in and have like translations and stuff. So that way you could understand each line a little bit better. So the first book talks about it's like our initiation. It talks about just, okay, like, hey, you're ready to learn yoga, you're ready to expand your mind and you know, have unity of mind. So like the first sutra is like, okay, welcome to yoga, right? The second sutra says, stilling of the agitated mind, moving past the emotions and thought forms. This is not reality. Reality is stillness of the mind. So Patanjali says in the second sutra that what reality is when our minds are still. This is reality. And let's be real. In the day and age that we live in, how often do we actually live in stillness? Like actually have stillness of the mind where our mind is completely still. I want you to just think about that. So going into the next couple sutras, it says, when stillness in the mind is achieved, then we experience our true form. When stillness of the mind is achieved, then we experience our true form. If not, we become absorbed in the movement of the mind. Ignorance, Maya. If the mind is not still, we become absorbed in the movement, the fluctuations of the agitated mind, which creates illusion, Maya, ignorance. There are 5 kinds of changing states. This is going into the 5th sutra. So there's 5 kinds of changing states of the mind. And they can be divided in 2 types, detrimental or non-detrimental. One creates pain and one does not. Anything that is impermanent leads to pain. Permanence does not lead to pain. So, does not equate to pain. So impermanent leads to pain, but permanence does not equate to pain. What is permanent? The Atman, which is our soul, our spirit, our true nature, our true identity. And this is what we are striving for in life, is to connect with our Atman, our soul, our spirit. Because our soul, our Atman, is our true identity, and it's what guides us through life. It cannot make choices for us. That's where ego is involved, right? But if we are in ego mind, disconnected from spirit, then ego takes over and thinks that it has, you know, it wants to create its own journey and its own thing, and it always leads towards pain and suffering. When you co-create with spirit, you will live in joy. There is peace and happiness there. So, going into the 6th sutra, it says the 5 minds, right knowledge, error, imagination, sleep, and memory. Those are the 5 states of mind. It says right knowledge consists of sense perception, logic, and verbal testimony. Now this is going into explaining each one. Error is the false knowledge that comes from incorrect apprehension, fear, desire, blocked senses. Those were 7 and 8, Sutras 7 and 8. Metaphor consists of the usage of words that are devoid of an actual object. Notions based on words create illusions, even when we can perceive them in the mind to be true. That was Sutra number 9. Patanjali is telling you that even in imagination, even in speaking in metaphor, notion based on words create illusions. Words are borrowed. This is going to be a whole nother subject, but I'm throwing the seed in there. Notions based on words create illusions even when we can perceive them in the mind to be true. Deep sleep is the state of mind which is based on absence. So even when we're sleeping, does not mean the mind is still. Memory is the retention of sense objects that have been experienced. That's Sutra 11. I'm going to repeat it. Memory is the retention of sense objects that have been experienced. I'm going to go a little deeper with that one and go back to A Course in Miracles. Lesson 7 of Course in Miracles. It has a workbook in the back that you do daily exercises. Lesson 7 says, I see only the past. This is going to correlate and you're hopefully going to make the connection. I'm reading from the book, Course in Miracles, Lesson 7. I see only the past. It is the reason why nothing that you see means anything. It is the reason why you have given everything you see all the meaning that it has for you. It is the reason why you do not understand anything you see. It is the reason why your thoughts do not mean anything and why they are like the things you see. It is the reason why you are never upset for the reason you think. It is the reason why you are upset because you see something that is not there. Old ideas about time are very difficult to change because everything you believe is rooted in time and depends on your not learning these new ideas about it. So I just want you to understand this a little bit deeper, and we're going to do a little exercise. I want you to pick just a random object in front of you. Doesn't have to, don't think too hard about it. Just whatever object you see first and set your eyes on it. And I want you to just look at it for a second and think to yourself, are you seeing the object? Or are you merely reviewing your past experience of seeing it, touching it, using it? You would have no idea of this object except of your past experiences with it. Do you then really see? Right? So this whole idea of memory being the retention of sense objects that have been experienced correlates to what is being said here, is that we believe it's there because of our past experience of having already seen it, experienced it, held it, touched it, read it, whatever, right? And so are we really then seeing, or are we just imagining something that's there, perceiving it's there because we've already experienced it? And so this just all ties back into the illusion of the mind. And I know that is really, really super deep. So I'm going to leave you there. And I'm not going to go any deeper because I want you to just really focus on that exercise. And I'm going to read the rest of the lesson for you so that you can do it correctly. So it says, look about you. This is equally true of whatever you look at. Acknowledge this by applying the idea for today indiscriminately to whatever catches your eye. For example, I see only the past in this pencil. I see only the past in this shoe. I see only the past in this hand. I see only the past in that body. I see only the past in that face. Do not linger over any one thing in particular, but remember to omit nothing specifically. Glance briefly at each object and then move on to the next 3 or 4 practice periods. Granted, this is number 7, and I'm sure that they go in an order. Like, if it's too much, if you're a little too mind blown by it, then just don't do the exercise. Just ponder on what I said about Maya and illusion and how we create this, how we create realities based off of non-realities, and get more in touch with what your Atman is, your soul. And so obviously meditation and yoga are things that Patanjali talks about doing in order to be able to understand self. So try to find time for stillness. You don't have to understand anything of what I said. You don't have to dig at it and analyze it and dissect it. Just go, after you turn this video off, after you turn this podcast off, go and sit with yourself for 5 minutes. Just 5 minutes to start with. If you're not really into meditating or anything like that, just sit for 5 minutes. And put on yoga music, put on a repeating om, put on water fountain music. That's what I love to listen to. Something that's just going to allow your mind to come to a place of stillness, and literally try and just focus on your breath. And when you see that your mind begins to wander off into thought, then come back to your breath. Okay, I'm breathing in. I know I'm breathing in. I'm breathing out. I know I'm breathing out. I'm breathing in. I know I'm breathing in. I'm breathing out. I know I'm breathing out. And repeat that to yourself until you're only focusing on that. Or maybe oming to yourself. Or like I said, listening to an om on repetition, like on YouTube or something. And just allow yourself to come to a stillness of the mind through using some form of one-pointedness, meaning your mind is focused on one thing only for 5 minutes. Give yourself that gift today, and just allow the information that I brought to you today to just integrate, because there's a knowing within you that is going to resonate with it or not. You don't have to resonate with it. You can completely think that what I said was hocus pocus and be like, oh, she's gone off the kilter. That's totally okay. I accept everyone's response to this. It's not right or wrong. And I'm not here to try and change your beliefs. What I am here to do is share the knowledge and wisdom that I've gained through my journey with you, so that you can have the tools accessible to you if you want to use them to help towards finding yourself, self-discovery, finding your Atman. What is your true self? What is your true identity? What is the divine within me? All right, with that being said, I'm going to leave it there. I am so grateful for each and every one of you. I hope that this podcast resonated with you on some level, or that the seeds were planted, even if nothing did resonate with you. Until next time, love.